going to have a wonderful evening tonight. John McKnight presenting, and your questions, your comments as he moves along and shares some things are more than welcome. We'll have a Q&A towards the end of the evening as well. So I'm Stephanie Parker. I'm with the Aurora Foundation of Southern Arizona. And we began this series called the Thought Leader Speaker Series just a year ago. This is our second annual speaker series. And the whole point of doing this speaker series is to bring people like John McKnight here to our stage, to our room, to our eyes and ears, to share innovative, unique ideas that most of us have never heard of before. Thought leaders provoke our awareness that there are potential right answers alongside with potential wrong answers to issues underlying what was, what is, and what can be. We invite speakers whose mindsets differ fundamentally from the mainstream mindsets in their field. We invite speakers whose creativity and knowledge, visionary yet pragmatic perspectives provoke innovative ideas, shining a light on the nuances where disability and justice intersect, which is what our vision and mission is. If ideas are the instigators for change, thought leaders are the agents that make those ideas reality. Their ideas merit attention, not only because they are directed to the future, but that they offer a direction that others follow. And I think this description captures John McKnight perfectly. And so with that, I hope you enjoy the evening, and I'm going to invite Peggy Hutchison down to introduce John to you. Thank you.
I think we have some microphones. I'm going to find them.
Okay, I'm going to try to shout. Can you hear me back there? Okay, good. Yes. Good evening, and thank you. It really is a privilege to join all of you in being able to actually meet John McKnight. Rarely does one, like myself, have the privilege and opportunity to meet somebody and hear somebody in person whose work you have not just followed, but used as a resource, used as a practitioner. And so I'm just delighted that John is here and that we have this opportunity. Many of you know John McKnight is the co-director of the Asset-Based Development Community Development Institute. And he's also professor emeritus at Northwestern University and teaches the areas of communication studies and education and social policy. John is also the co-author of Building Communities from the Inside Out, and that's where he talks a lot about asset-based community development. He's also written 2 other books, The Careless Society and The Abundant Community. I think what's most, not just impressive, but important about John's work, and especially his research, is that it is informed, has been informed, by many, many years of being a neighborhood organizer, being on the ground, struggling with people who are working for full human rights, for full equal justice. That's what John did and continues to do. But instead of kind of starting in the university and being kind of the academic that does the research and kind of goes back to the neighborhood to study them and then leaves again, John started out in the neighborhoods with the people as a neighborhood organizer, working on issues of civil rights, human rights, community justice, racial justice, community development. So, I don't know John, except, through reading and learning and hearing and trying to use some of his models. But if I were to think about John. Who is this guy who's sharing with us tonight? I would say John is somebody who has devoted his life to full human rights and equal justice for all. He believes, it's not just that John believes, he knows that everyone has skills, capacity, gifts, and much to teach all of us to build strong neighborhoods and communities. And finally, John, before you come up, I started thinking about what else about John? What is it about him? And I went back to a poem, I think, a teaching that comes from the Arizona Hopi Nation, from the elders Oraibi. And it is, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but they say, we are the ones we've been waiting for. June Jordan actually wrote a poem about the people of South Africa. We are the ones we've been waiting for. But let me just say this. We are the ones we have been waiting for. It is time to speak your truth. Create your community. Be good to each other. And do not look outside yourself for the leader. John, welcome, and thank you for coming to Tucson.
Who is that guy she was talking about? I recognize him. I'm a guy who spent about 20 years in neighborhoods as an organizer, and then got lost in university for another 35 years. It's about what I could say. And when I got into university, since the only thing I knew anything about was organizing local communities, I tried to inspire some research about local communities that might be useful. And that's what I've done at the university over the succeeding time, is doing research that community organizations, neighborhoods, local people could use in terms of improving their lives and their joint work. So tonight, if I have anything to share, that's mostly what it's about. So if you're not interested in that, you can leave. That's the thing we know about. Community is a word that doesn't have a common referent, right? If I say pipe, everybody has the same thing in mind. And if I say community, nobody has the same thing in mind. Everybody is thinking about something different. Your community is not what I'm going to say. And my wife would even say her community is the same as mine. So it's a word which doesn't get you very far. If you say, I'm concerned about community and want to do something about changing, improving, making things better in a local community. And so when I got to the university, they wanted me to start a program in community studies. And so I recognized this problem of the definition. So if you're going to study communities, you had to figure out what community meant, and I knew that it meant something different to everybody. So we went over to the sociology department, people who study groups, and we asked them for an authoritative and useful definition of community. And let me tell you, you don't want to do that. You're wasting your time. You're not going to get an authoritative or useful answer. And they admitted that. They said that it's something, community is a word which you have to arbitrarily decide what you mean. But it's important to know what you mean, because if you get a bunch of people who want to do something about the community, they got to have at least some of the same thing in their mind. So we decided that maybe something we could do was to try to see if there was a way of defining a community so that it would be universal, everybody could agree, and it would be useful. The way we did that was that we began in neighborhoods in Chicago, knocking on doors in neighborhoods, usually older inner city neighborhoods, and asking people a question, same question, which is, can you tell us what people have done here together that made things better? And we collected over 4 years. We went to 20 cities and about 300 neighborhoods and collected about 3,000 answers to that question. What have people done here together that made things better? Now, I'm not a real academic. They just brought me into the university, made me a professor. I'm a fake professor. So I didn't know that these stories aren't worth anything in the university. Stories are called anecdotes, and you put them down, right? So when we got to university, we had our bag of stories, and we took the label off. It said stories. We pasted a new label when we got to university. It says case studies. And you make lead into gold. If you say a story is a case study. And so we had 3,000 case studies in the university. And we tried to analyze them, because we knew publishing a book of 3,000 stories was not going to be anything anybody would read. So what could we say to people in neighborhoods based on successful initiatives? We knew more about successful, very local initiatives than anybody has ever known. What can we say in general that would be useful to people in any neighborhood? And we looked at these stories from a particular perspective. We looked at each one and said, what did people use in this story that made things better? What did they use? Now, the reason we probably asked that question was because we were always in lower income, poorer neighborhoods asking these questions. Or we're in the rural, correlate, dying small towns. And so if you were in a university or in a government or in a helping agency, and you looked at these, quote, dying small towns or, quote, troubled inner city neighborhoods, they all understood them as being needy places full of deficits and problems, and that's the way they approached them. Well, I was sort of offended by that, having been a neighborhood organizer, because I knew there was much more there than what they understood. And so we said, well, maybe if we can help people see what is there that people use, that it isn't just a broken deficit place that needs to be fixed, that would be our best contribution. So we looked at all the stories and concluded that no matter what the story was about, it might be about saving the local shopping strip, or it might be doing something for young girls, or enhancing the cultural life, all kinds of stories. But that there were 5 basic building blocks that were used no matter what the story was about. But they didn't use all of them at once. There were just 5 basic resource building blocks, ingredients, whatever you want to call them. And so that a story about a successful initiative was usually a mix and match, right? 2 of building blocks 1 and 3 of building blocks 2, or something of that order. Never hardly all 5 building blocks. So we began to think of these like they were ingredients of a cake, right? Because each ingredient stands by itself, but not very tasty until you put them together. The flour is not very tasty alone with the sugar, you put them together, right? So we were identifying the 5 ingredients that in neighborhoods people put together to make a community cake. And so we decided, now this is shortly, 3 or 4 years after I got to university, and as I said, I'm not tuned in very well to the way they think there. And so we decided to put out a guide based on our work, our research, for neighborhoods called The Ingredients of a Successful Community Cake. And when the research director of the Institute for Policy Research, I was, found out we were going to do that, she said, "You can't have a title like that for the university." And I said, "Why not?" She said, "Because everybody will understand what you're talking about." And so it was. And we went back and huddled to try to find a word for these 5 things that nobody would understand, so that they would come to the university and pay good money to find out what they already knew, which is mostly what was on at the university. I found out anyway, right? So we settled on the word assets. So these were 5 assets that exist in almost every neighborhood or small town. And we chose assets because in the world of finance, an asset is something that if you invest small, if you invest it well, it grows. And that's what these assets were. If you invested them well, they grew. But it means nothing to anybody, but it's a good word. So we said there are 5 assets, and we renamed ourselves the Asset-Based Community Development Institute, which ensures that nobody will know what we're talking about, but they will come to hear what that means, right? What it means is there are 5 things that you all know that exist in every neighborhood, but don't usually think about as being the key ingredients for community change. And so what I can share with you is the 5 ingredients that make the cake. And instead of giving you a list of these assets, we usually draw a map because we're thinking about community defined by space, not a community of musicians or any other dispersed community. We're thinking about a neighborhood or a small town, and that's where the assets are that appear in our work and stories. So the first asset is the flour in the cake. It's the universal asset, and you're looking at it up here on the screen. The first asset, this comes from the high-tech graphics center of our university. And it is the residence. Every story had in it always some residents of the neighborhood. However, you may notice that it's a little unusual. This person's visualized there, and this person has a gift box in their hand to indicate that the first asset is the gifts and the capacities of local residents. And that may not be very startling to you, but for institutions in our society, it is unimportant, these assets, right? Because there are no glasses in the School of Education, so I don't have a glass. But imagine I have a glass that is half full, right? And that glass is like people, like everybody in this room, like me. We all have deficits, problems, and needs, and we all have capacities and skills and gifts. And every neighborhood is the same. It has problems and deficits, and it has assets and capacities. So, what our work initially made clear to us is that most people concerned about neighborhoods and institutions that are policymakers or providers of help are looking at the empty half. And they call the empty half of people in a neighborhood needs. So when you hear about needs surveys or people focused on needs, they are looking at you or the people they're talking about as empty, about their emptiness. But not a single story that we got was about what they did with the empty half. Everything was always about what they did with the full half. So here you got all these helping agencies and governmental institutions all focusing on deficits and needs. But every story about local people making successful change was not about that. It was about the identification and the mobilization of their gifts and capacities, even though they also had deficits, right? And the funny thing is, we all, people who are in the better off part of society know this and act on it. But then when they say people who are not in the better half, they change their tune. I always think about the faculty at the university where I was. We had 11 faculty members. And if I would go to a faculty meeting now, and we were usually chosen among all the departments of the kind I was in as one of the 2 best in the country. So here are the 11 best people. And who's there? But sitting next to me would be Paul. And Paul has cancer. He's dying. And next to him was a woman named Mary, who got divorced 2 years ago, and her children just left her to go live with her husband. She had lost the family. Next to her is a guy named Charlie, who's just crazy as a coot. The psychiatrist ever finds him, he's gone like that. But we've suffered that turkey for 30 years because he's the greatest student of English rhetoric in the United States. And then I'm sitting next to him, and I got a bad heart. Bypass operation. Now, I won't bore you with the other 8 of us, but we're all like that. And I hate to suggest this, but in this room, we're all like that. How did we become the best department of its kind in the university in the United States? This group of 11 broken, messed up people. Because we were an institution that ignored our deficits and nurtured our capacities. And then we found these same institutions go to low-income neighborhoods, and they do the reverse. They say, and with you, we're going to ignore your assets and focus on your deficits. So in a sense, one of the messages of our work is do unto others as you do unto yourself. Because successful initiatives are never based on a focus on deficits and needs at the community level. So the first asset is the gifts and the capacities of local people who are harder to see, but they're in equal number to other neighborhoods. And they're harder to see because these neighborhoods are victims of labeling that depersonalizes people. And they say, you're a welfare mother, and you're mentally ill, and you're developmentally disabled, and you're a welfare mother, and you're a youth at risk. which is all ways of knocking people out of the community box by saying, oh, we're helping them, but we're labeling them so we classify them by deficit. And that's community busting activity, we think. So if you're interested in community building, this is the center, the assets. Are you going to flick me ahead? Okay. Let's see the next one. The second asset is, in every neighborhood, there are all kinds of groups whose business is the multiplication and magnification of the gifts and the capacities of local people by bringing them together to make each of their individual gifts become magnified. Think about a choir, the 20 people in the neighborhood who sing well, and you put them together in an association called a choir, right? Then they have more voice for the community and more power for the person who is singing. So every association is that, and we don't think much about them, but in our work, they are the most important element of all community building, the local associations. So those are the collective building blocks as against the individual building blocks, right? And they're nearly invisible to most people. But I said I started out as a neighborhood organizer, and for a neighborhood organizer, they are the basic raw material of community building. Right? They're the most important thing, not the institution. So, and when we, at the end of gathering a story, we would say to people, can you tell us where this initiative started? And in the majority of the 3,000 cases, it started with an association. So they're the fountainhead of community building and community change. And if you go to our website, you'll see a lot of documents helping people identify at the local level the associations that people belong to. So the third, so there is the center of a community. It's residents and their gifts, and its multiplier and magnifiers, its associations. So almost all local community building depends centrally on whether you know and are identifying that space and mobilizing it for full action. Now, there are also, every association is a group of unpaid people. In every neighborhood, there are also useful groups of people who are the third asset, but they're paid. They're the institutional people, three kinds: business people, not-for-profit people, and government people, the three kinds of institutions. And they appear in the stories, and they sound different. I get you to think in your community about the local child care agency, maybe the city hall, and a welding shop. They don't sound too much alike, but they are very much alike compared to associations. And they're alike because they're organized in a completely different way from associations. They're organized this way. This is how governments are organized, how health, social service, not-for-profits are organized, and how most businesses are organized. So associations are circles, institutions are triangles. They do different work. And when we would constantly be told also about failed initiatives. So we'd write those up and try to figure out why did they fail. And the most frequent reason they failed was because locally people thought that institutions could do what only associations and residents and their gifts can do. Got it? Key two different tools. And a medical institution cannot significantly improve health in any place. Epidemiologists will tell you the best of medical care may represent 11–12% of how long you'll live or how often you'll be sick. All the rest is a set of factors that are in the community. So institutions, right, are different than associations. And when institutions claim to do what only communities and their associations can do, they fail. But what they produce is counterfeit. It looks like the real thing, but it isn't. And an example of that is institutions that purport to care for you. Didn't used to be that was true. Institutions used to say, we can provide you a service or a commodity. But now they're saying, we care for you. You care, I think. I say, I care for Marcia. What's that mean? It means a freely given commitment from the heart of one person for another. I care for her. I care for him. I care for my father. I care for this neighbor. And care is what makes an association work. It is a group of people who care for each other and trust each other. And what makes an institution work is money. And it's the hard truth. So what an institution can do is provide a service. What a community can do is provide care, because the whole nexus of its relationships are care-based. Not to say there can't be caring people in an institution, but an institution, so it's a joke that's developed in the last 25 years called managed care. There's as much managed care as there are purple cows. It's a system trying to act like it's a community. A month ago, I got a letter from my insurance company. It was typed on the front of my name. And I opened up and it said, Dear John, we care about you. There's no human being in that insurance company knows that I exist. But they're stealing care. Because they know it's the most valuable thing in anybody's life, is that somebody care for me. And so it's been a phony deal of counterfeiting, in which we're having institutions say they're the center of care. And too many of us have bought into it. We bought into it with our young people. We bought into it with our old people, right? We've said, oh, you care, do you, nursing home? Well, let me give you my father, because I can't care. And you do. Whereas what you can do is provide a service. Our children have been, in the last generation in particular, systematically outsourced to institutional forms of service. They are not. There are very few communities today that are villages that raise their children. What we've got is residences that outsource to schools, social workers, recreational workers, probation officers, youth workers, you name it, psychologists. We outsource the raising of our children to them, and then the community becomes weak And the kids, have you noticed, they begin to act funny because they know people don't really care about them. That they're clients, that they are worth money, and they're getting services. So knowing the difference between a triangle and a circle, and recovering the capacity of our circle life to be a village that raises children is an absolutely critical question. Now the fourth, we'll come back to this later. Fourth asset is, the first three assets are three forms of people. One, individual gifts. Second, gifts multiplied through association. Third, institutions that are powered by money. They're people groups. The fourth asset is the place itself, the land, the improvements on it, and everything under it. So there's the map, the four assets: individual gifts, associations, institutions, and the land. And the fifth asset is exchange. We can't put it on a map because it isn't a thing. But in stories, people are constantly sharing things, trading things, bartering things, exchanging things, buying things, and selling things. And that process of exchange is a major asset. So there's the asset map. And knowing the reality of that where you are, or anybody who wants to be connected to community, is the essential work of a community organizer or people who want to support community organizations. So let me stop and ask whether we have arguments, testimonials, statements. Yes, sir.
Question. In your experience, have you found situations in which the association, the voluntary association, and the institutions intersect well?
Yes.
Where they kind of support each other, and where the institution is more association-like in your framework?
Or more association receptive. I don't think probably like, but
Okay.
yes. And there's a whole continuum.
Sure.
There are institutions, the main purpose is to replace community life, right? To those who are neutral, to those who can be supported. For instance, in public health people we found are people who are very often the professionals, people who are very supportive of the inner circles and people in that domain. Librarians increasingly are very much focused on this question of who's in this local community and what's there and how we can support it, because they can fast see that being a bookcase has no survival to it. They got to figure out something to be under the bookcase. And so they're very receptive. Police in big cities, at least, are receptive. Because they understand that they have real limits in terms of what they can do to deal with the problems we call crime. And if people aren't organized in their local community, they're losing the game. So there are receptive institutions, yes.
I was thinking, because I've spent 40 years in education also at the elementary, secondary level, and I was thinking of the continuum of homeschooling to religious-based schooling, which is, I think, much more community-oriented, and then the public school system, which is something different.
I would say on our continuing experience, as people who come to us from institutions and say, can you assist us in understanding what a community map is and how we could make connections there that are supportive rather than cooperative? The public health people might be at one end in terms of the frequency, how often these people show up, and who is at the far end
Public education.
Public education, we never hear of it. Because they do believe that if the community just straightened itself up, that school is how you know things. No police believe that police is how you're safe.
Right.
No doctor believes that health is how you're healthy, that medicine is how you're healthy. But school people ain't got it. And that's the reason we're having so little progress.
Right. I agree.
Yes, and we're going to get a little closer into that. Yes?
All of these that you've listed are kind of tangible things.
Now,
What about the intangible? The dreams, the ideas, the visions? Are these not assets to the community?
yes, sometimes we had a little debate. There's some of us who say there are 6 assets, but we don't put dreams. We say stories. That the stories of the community, which I think are very closely related to what you're talking about, are themselves a powerful asset that give a sense of the past and the future. I would agree. It's a very important function. Yes. But yes.
How do you see technology that's supporting this or being a detriment?
Technology, you mean things like the internet?
I mean, well, there's everything from the internet to our smartphones to all of this, and the fact that, I guess as I look at it, the fact that we now text each other. I mean, kids, it's sitting, instead of talking to each other, are texting to each other, right, in the same house. It used to be kids went out and played, now they text, right? How do we're not going to get rid of it, right? How do we use it in this? Have you considered that?
I had a great, wonderful friend, the smartest man I ever met in my life. His name, some of you who are older may remember him from the 60s, a guy named Ivan Illich. Anybody here remember Ivan Illich?
Yes.
Radical historian, social analyst. And when he first saw a little small computer, laptop or something of that order, I was with him. And he said to me, he said, what we must remember now that we see something that does what you're talking about is that the way you know you're dead is not just that your heart's stopping. It is that your senses no longer operate. You are not tasting, seeing, hearing, feeling, touching, or smelling. And so he said, most modern technology is a way of removing you from being sensible. And I love this. And moving you into a world of nonsense. So that's, I've always used that as a measure. Does this, can I smell it, touch it, feel it, right? Because the reality of the human condition that makes a difference is us, not electricity. It's between us, right? Now, you say possibly. A place where it's been useful at the neighborhood level is in it is useful when it can be used to create an artificial group and then get it to become a real human group. And that's a wonderful thing. I had that experience. We have a Labrador Retriever. And Marcia, my wife, came across a thing that there is a Cook County Labrador Retrievers Owners Association. And we both agreed we ought to go to that. And you could bring your dog. And the meetings are held in a parking lot of a large forest preserve, where we all go with our dogs. And we talk with each other about the world's greatest dog, which you all know is Labrador Retriever. And our dogs sniff each other. And it's a delightful, wonderful gathering of people with affinity that are strong. And the computer got us there. So that's good. But when it acts like it is creating friends or networks that are electrical, no, that's a replacement. Now I should also add, how many of you have read a book called Bowling Alone? You know, no, not very popular. Well, it's about 15 years old. It's a book, it's really a major study done by Bob Putnam, who's a friend of ours at Harvard. He's a political scientist. And he was interested in associations. And so it's a study, a longitudinal study, a 20th century study of what's happened to associations and Americans' activity in associational life. And again, it's a wonderful book, Bowling Alone, Robert Putnam. But in it, he traces numbers of associations and numbers of people involved with associations through time. And the first data he could get was 1900. And so he charts it. And we became ever more associational every year, even through the Second World War, until 1969. And then it flattened out. And then the number of people belonging to associations and the number of associations began to decline. Remember, this is the principal community building tool at the neighborhood level. It's not declining. And it's continuing to decline. And he thinks, I don't know, so we have a standard argument. He thinks it's clearly because in 1969 was the year when more than 50% of the people in this country had a television set. And that the decline is a result of television and computers, and all its secondary artifacts that here are today. And he says, so this is the real answer about the electronic world. He says the important thing, John, is you've got to look at what people are doing with their life. The average American household has television on, catch this, 7.5 hours a day. That's more than half the time of waking hours. 7.5 hours a day. And then just think in your mind, in the last week, if you counted up the hours you were in front of a computer or any other handhold manifestation, how many hours would it be? I see a lot of things. Okay. Now, there may be a few other people who can give this testimony. I'm going to give it. I'm 81 years of age. And I can remember first television set that was not in a store, you looked at it in the window, that you would have at home. I was 24 years of age. And the first laptop I probably got 10 years ago. So until 23, I didn't have screens in my life. What the hell was I doing? You get it?
Yeah.
So if the principal building blocks of community is our gifts and their connection, in fact, okay? And instead, the connection we have is with the two, then it may be that the greatest erosion of community life comes from not what it does, but what we do in letting it eat up our lives. So, other thoughts, questions, arguments? Yes?
do you think the relationship between institutions and labeling, it's, I see it as connected to what the institution is actually doing, or what service they're supposedly providing and what money they're trying to gain, versus if associations or individuals identify with a cultural or political identity, that's less dangerous than the co-opting of that label or the institutions gaining monetarily or whatever.
In the neighborhood, the way we now know you can determine how strong or weak a neighborhood is what percentage of the people in the neighborhood have labels. Labels that are provided by the helping profession. Because every one of those labels, signs are helping you. What they're doing is knocking you out of the box by saying what's important about you is what's wrong. So I think there's a very strong relationship between the labeling process and the decline of community capacity as more and more people are knocked out of the box as though they don't have gifts and they aren't good enough. Now, can I move on? Is it all right? Okay. Yeah, one more.
I just wanted to, it's a comment. I've been working in behavioral health for 15 years, and I think that I can finally put words to what's deeply disturbing to me about my career after listening to you. It's also very true. We're very focused on needs and very focused on fixing.
On what?
On fixing.
I'm fixing.
It's just constant fixing.
No, I'm not against fixing.
But we're not fixing from the association aspect.
It's fixing people dominating community life for patients. The problem. In its place, it's fine. I mean, I had a bypass operation, right? They fixed me, and I'm pretty happy about it. Probably here because of it. Right? But the people who did it weren't people like me, a community organizer. I'm a full half God. Right? If I can't see in the people in my neighborhood that they have capacities and abilities, I'm dead. Because they ain't what I got. But the people at Presbyterian St. Luke's Hospital on the 7th floor in the cardiology unit, they're sitting up there aching for bad hearts. Right? Something happened that we got some medicine did away with bad hearts. What are those poor turkeys up there doing? They need needs. They need my bad heart. So can you see there are institutions that need deficits, which is why they do need surveys with the weakest people who can't resist them. On the other hand, there are institutions that are not misusing the question of needs. I don't want to say all of them are, but it's growing stronger and stronger. It's client making more and more, and consumer making. The corporations doing exactly the same, right? They want to tell us that we could buy the solution to any problem we ever had in life. Think about buying, right? They're the solution. So they're out making us into consumers and clients. And client is a good word contrasted with citizen. And when I say citizen, I don't mean legal citizen. Citizen, I mean the way it's classically meant, a member of a democracy. So if you're in a democracy, you're a citizen. The government can try to disallow you. It's what they've done. But that's now. The Greek root for client is kli, C-L-I, and it comes from their word that means a person on their back. And we know this in our own language at time in the word recline. It's the same CLI. So client making is a way of having a nation of people on their backs. Citizen comes from a Greek word too. And it means a member of a city, but that meant you were a person with the power to shape the future because you could vote. So associational life depends on citizens, but institutions and corporations really depend on our emptiness, client making and consumer making, right? The idea is you can buy a life. So at any rate, can I move on? Because I want to take it someplace else. We think there are a lot of ways of understanding what people have as gifts. And we work with a fair number of neighborhood groups and neighborhood organizers who are interested in starting the community building process by identifying what people have to offer and contribute. But how would you ask? What are they? So let me try this with you. It's simple enough that if you're interested, you walk out of the room and do it yourself. But what I'd like you to do first is to think about what you think is your most significant gift. And here, I want to give you a definition. A gift is something you were born with, not something you learned. So what is your most significant gift? Got a bunch, I know it's hard to pick. Now, let's listen. What would you say?
Strength of purpose.
Strength of purpose. Okay. You should ask him to tell you.
Fair-mindedness.
Fair-mindedness.
My brain.
Optimism.
Caring.
Caring.
Compassion.
Okay. And yours?
Ability to think.
Ability to think. And yours?
I think looking at other perspectives.
Now, as we begin to see it like at the time, I asked, like, when we turn this room into something that wasn't at all. You were just a bunch of. Or I could ask you, tell me the worst diagnosis you had. And we'd have a bunch of needy people. But when I asked you your gifts, did you hear those things? Are those important that they're talking about? Are they more important than whether or not you can add? Did you notice they're all different? We know that in general, you can ask about 40 people that question before you get a repeat. Why do associations, when they work, work? We're uncovering right now the reason. Because if everybody had only compassion, bringing us together wouldn't mean much. But once you get away from labels and names and get at the four things I'm going to lead us through, you will begin to see a completely different understanding of our diversity. The huge diversity in our gifts. Therefore, the possibilities of what can happen through this connection is replete. Now, I'd like you to think about a second thing. What is your most significant skill? This is something you probably learned or developed, unlike a gift which you were given. So if you had to think about your most significant skill, what would it be? What is your most significant skill? Listening. And yours? Yours. Patience. Good. Mine. Critical analysis. Good with people.
Helping others succeed.
Helping others succeed.
I was thinking patience as well.
Problem solving.
Now, we had a gifted group, but now we have a skilled group. And did you notice the repetitions? Hardly. So if we knew the skills of everybody in the room, we could see why associative possibilities for community building are so strong. Because once you get away from names or labels and look at gifts, what you're beginning to see is not just a richness that everybody has these things, but it is so diverse that it's like you could build a house because you have a carpenter and a plumber and a tile setter and an electrician. Now let's think about a third one. And this one gets a little more to, you might have a gift, you might have a skill, but you might never have done much with it. So in trying to get at something that is deeper even, we think asking people, what is your most significant passion, helps you get action connected to attribute. So think about what are you most passionate about? Most significant passion.
I'm passionate about how animals can enrich people's lives.
Oh, I think I'm almost with you. With you? Environment. That's a wonderful passion. Writing. Building institutions. Including people who will do my heart out right now. Yours. Justice. Yours. Helping is the greatest passion. And yours. Giving. And yours. A healthy future. Healthy future. Did you notice something again? What was it? Diversity. You see, we are changing who's in the room. We now have a bunch of gifted, skilled, and passionate people. But the diversity is huge. So the building block that people and their gifts are for associative work is huge. Can you see it now? Now, let's ask the last one. What do you know well enough that you could teach it to somebody else? Either an adult or a child. What do you know well enough that you could teach? I'll do something a little different. I'm going to go down this row, and then I'm going to go down this row. I'm going to do it quickly, and I just want you to tell me in one or two words what you could teach you. And I want you to think about the school that is nearest to you as you listen. Okay. What did you teach?
Theater set design.
Theater set design.
Budgeting.
Budget.
ESL.
ESL.
Math.
Math.
Jewelry making.
Cooking.
Cooking.
Wood carving.
Woodcut.
Gardening.
Gardening.
Problem solving.
Problem solving.
Reading.
Reading.
Real estate.
Real estate law. You notice the repetitions?
I have actually some difficulty thinking about it. I try to teach disabilities.
Disabilities that. Review.
Slightly repetitive, but I'm going to be more specific. Phrasing.
Phrasing. A way of cooking.
I'm waiting.
Yes. Community social work.
Making a new friend.
Oh, boy. Making a new friend.
Dancing.
Dancing. Writing.
Dancing was taken, but enjoy moving.
Inside.
Enjoy moving.
Enjoy moving, yes.
Time management.
Time management. Chemistry. Where is there a school that could teach what these people in the school can teach? Now, if there's one institution that is failing us the most, it's school.
It's the one I worked in.
I mean, the efforts, the reform, the things, and the little bits of change are tragic. I'm not reporting this, so I'm happy about it. But did you just hear what I heard? Every community has more teachable knowledge than any school in that community has. So, if we had a community organization that understood people's gifts and made connections, we could really begin to have a village that could raise a child instead of outsourced children getting second-rate service. So it's here.
So it seems to me that one of the defining characteristics of an association is that it's greater than the sum of its parts.
Yes.
Whereas an institution, if you are grouping people by labels, you're ending up with a much more homogeneous, monotonous, I mean, you're keeping your capacity at a certain level because you're not looking for other attributes.
Has each of you just thought about your most significant gift? Think about it again. Each of you who has a job, those of you who think your most significant gift, that your job has allowed you to manifest your most significant gift, will you raise your hand? And that's about maybe half the people. And this is the key to any kind of institutional connection to people. This is that. So here's a neighborhood in Chicago where a neighborhood organizer has been going door to door asking people, what are your gifts, what are your skills, what are your passions, what do you teach, and what association do you belong to? Now he knows everything you need to know to really build a community. Right? And so this is, I'll have to go up here a bit, but this is a neighborhood which is Chicago has 76 neighborhoods, and this is the third lowest income neighborhood. It's an African-American neighborhood. About 10% of the people have gone to any form of higher education. So he knocks on the door and he asks these 4 questions. So he asks Barbara Robinson on Ingleside, and here's what she says. She says, I'm a good listener, it's gifts. I can do cooking, mentoring, I'm a good communicator, good at discernment. The person next door said, I'm good with my hands, I'm a good communicator, good listener, and good with kids. Next door, I can do organizing, planning, good at communication, problem solving. Next door, connecting with others, have objectivity, and good at handworking, skills, lists, passions, they could teach. Now what we know from neighborhoods where they do this is that even in neighborhoods where people are looked at as the most troubled, deficient people, which people in Chicago would tell you about this neighborhood, that's what's there. Nobody's looking, right? So the new community organizing is about identifying and connecting. Now, so they ask 17, well, they know that on average in this kind of a neighborhood, people will give you 4 of each of those things. So there's one person in a house, and she'll give you 16 attributes. There are 40 people, 40 houses on the block. So who can tell me what 16 times 40 is? 600 miles. 640. So on this block, anybody who paid attention to the gifts that people have on that block would find 640. Now, if I go to university, they can tell me how many teenage pregnant girls there are there. If I go to the city government, they can tell me how many below-code houses there are there. But who knows that there are 640 gifts waiting to be given, because the question that goes with this is, would you be willing to share it with people on this block? So you're only seeing the ones they share. Now, they took what 17 people told them about what they could teach, and the neighborhood organization had a youth at-risk program. This is one of the more brilliant ideas systems that institutions develop, which is, if you have any person with a deviant problem, the most logical thing you could ever do is put that person with another person who has the same deviant problem. Isn't that a brilliant notion? So people with that brilliant notion have funded this neighborhood organization to take a group of kids that the schools are trying to kick out and put them together in a youth at risk program so they can all learn how to get kicked out together. Dumb, dumb, dumb. And it's true in any field, development, anywhere, aggregation of people around which are thought of as deficits is the surest way to fail. Surest way. So at any rate, they know what these 17 people will teach. And they made a list of those things, and they say to them, to the kids in the at-risk program, we got a bunch of new teachers, and we want to know whether you want to learn anything that they can teach you. And you want to go to school, you'll get taught around here, but we only want you to indicate what you really want to learn. Now, if you went into the school, they'd say, these are the kids who really want to learn nothing. So can we see the next one? This shows you what the gifts go. Come on, next one. These are 17 people, gifts, skills, next one. Passions, next one. Teachables, next one. Okay, so here's the list. So they say to the kids, here's what the people in the neighborhood could teach you. What do you want to learn? And there you see it. I don't know, can you see the numbers? What's the top? First one, a little surprising, cooking. Right? And almost the same number of boys as girls want to learn cooking. And so I asked the organizer, why do you think cooking is at the top of the list? And they said, in a community where very few people work, they probably know more people who do work are cooks than anything else. So it's not that they want to learn cooking for eating, they want to cook cooking for working. Next one, banking. Dropout kids, African American, you can see this stereotype, right? What do they want to learn? Nothing, they're dropping out. They want to learn banking. And two people in the neighborhood could teach them. What else they want to learn? Computer technology. Several people could do this. What else they want to learn? How to start a business. What else? Painting, but they don't mean pictures. They mean painting as a craft. The real estate business, skating, typing, black history, physical business. But I think what you can see there is a group of young people who are going to be pushed out of school, for sure. Come on. Who want to learn. And what they want to learn is how to survive economically in our society. And what they want to learn, and people who know it, live 200 feet from each other. The future of America is not in building more universities that charge like mine $56,000 a year tuition, because these kids will never see that place. But our future is to begin to rediscover how America was built in the first place, on the basis of the skills and the capacities of local residents and their associations. And that leads me to the other point I wanted to share with you, which is all the initiatives had one thing in common. They were about assets being connected. Every single story was about these two assets in this neighborhood that got connected, that weren't connected before. All community building is about connecting assets. But that doesn't happen unless somebody or some group is taking the leadership in the connecting process. So and reviving neighborhoods in a place like Tucson, a critical question is, who connects? Who knows the map? And who's good at connecting? And who are the connectors in the neighborhood? And that is what neighborhood renewal in the United States is basically moving toward at the present time. Now we're getting late. Now I wanted to show you one other thing. I wanted to show you and tell you a story about 4 gifted people, where somebody discovered their gift, made a connection, and the community grew stronger. So we're making this very real. So, can you click ahead till we get to a picture? There, stop there. Now this fellow's name is first name is Eddie. And Eddie resides in a group home in a Puerto Rican neighborhood in Chicago. And he spends a lot of his time there doing macrame. The neighborhood organization created a committee that they called a community building committee, which meant we're going to get more people participating in the life of this community. They knew the map, and they said, we got lots of people who aren't participating. And that's what makes a weak neighborhood. It's the proof of a weak neighborhood is half the people are not contributing. What makes it stronger is every new person who's contributing. And as strong as a community can be is when everybody contributes what they have, like what we just heard. So, this neighborhood organization had a connective group, connective task force, 5 residents, one of whom got paid a little money, right? And their job was to expand participation, and they started by going to group homes in the neighborhood for people who were labeled developmentally disabled. And they met this fellow, Eddie. Now, none of these people were professionals. One was a homemaker, one worked at the post office, one managed the building. They were all 5 of them were women. And so a couple of them met him. And it was not unusual. They are people who are connectors, these 5. Have a proven record of connecting. And so they're able to understand how important connecting is, because that's what they have done. They're like hosts and hostesses. And they are also gift-centered. The 2 characteristics of successful connectors are gift-centered and connected. And all 5 of these women are. And so they meet this guy and they see him in a different way than the people who run the group home. They're there to find out what gift he has. Now, the group home, they don't think he has enough gifts to even work. So he's doing macro. So they spend no time with him. When we talked with him a year later, they said, we could see immediately what his gift was. And I said, well, what was it? And they said, look at the picture. I said, he is the happiest person we have ever seen in our life. And he's like that all the time. So did you ever think that happiness was a gift? Well, they did. And he not only is happy like that all the time, but he talks like this all the time too. So when this happy guy comes into a room talking like this, people pay attention to him. And so 5 women sit around and say, where would a person who has this incredibly powerful gift of happiness be connected on our map? And now this is community thinking. I just love this. He said, we thought, well, an unhappy place needs a happy person. So they said, we considered the unhappy places here in Logan Square. And they said, we thought about the jail. They were unhappy there. We didn't think he'd like it. We thought the high school, where 42% of all the students drop out every year. So they might be sort of his age, but we didn't think he'd bring happiness there. High school is just a desperately unhappy place. But they said, then we thought the hospital. Maybe the hospital would be a good place for a happy person. So two of them went with Eddie to the hospital administrator. Can you show the next picture? This is the hospital. This is a Puerto Rican neighborhood. And the hospital is called Norwegian American. Because it was a Norwegian neighborhood up to about 1911. The last Norwegian went to the suburbs. But the hospital is still Norwegian American Hospital. And the administrator is Jose Lopez, right? Right? So they go to him and they say to him, Mr. Lopez, we think it would be good, they had Eddie with them. You see Eddie, you see how happy he is. We think it would be good if he were in the hospital because he would bring happiness to people who are here. And of course you can imagine a hospital administrator is not just jumping at this idea. And he asked him a few more questions, and then he agreed. Now, we did an evaluation of what they did, so I can tell you why he agreed. Because they came from the neighborhood organization. And he depends for his clientele on people in the neighborhood. And he can't mess around much with the neighborhood organization. One more reason, to have people in a real community, right? So he said, will you stick with it? And they said, yes. And he said, okay, well, why don't you bring him around and see what he likes. So, can you show me the next one? Yeah. He spent time with a couple of the members of the task force in the hospital. They walked around and he decided finally he didn't like the offices, they were dull. The operating room seemed fascinating to him, so he wanted to be in the operating room. And the hospital administrator said, you can't do that. Board of Health laws, people who are not professionals in the operators are going to do that. And so they were thinking, well, maybe this is not right. But then Eddie saw a person who delivers the departmental mail every day from the department, and who wears a little vest while delivering the mail. And Eddie's a sort of important kind of guy, right? And he liked the vest, I think. And so he said, can I do that? Because they move around the hospital, the deliverer. Right? And they said, well, we'll give it a try. Now, so here he is going to be the mailman. There's one little problem is that he can't read. So what do you do with a mailman who can't read? Right. Well, they decided that they would take each departmental envelope in the mail and put an animal sticker on it. And then at the department, where the secretary for the department was, they would put on her desk a sticker of the same animal. So he delivered the elephant mail to the elephant secretary. And so he began to do that. And as he began to become comfortable, he walked up and down the halls. He probably walked 2-3 times because he liked so much walking in the halls. And after about 3-4 days, he became very confident. And he began to say, in his loud voice, mailman, mailman. As he went down the hall. And then he began, this is all natural for Eddie, right? He began to look in the rooms and see people, right? And he began to introduce himself. And he'd say, hi, my name's Eddie. Who are you? What's your name?
Sarah.
He said, oh, my name's Sarah. And then he had a ritual. He'd say, how are you feeling, Sarah? Which is his sort of standard greeting. And Sarah, who had just come out of the operating room, said, pretty bad. And this is the miracle. Eddie would look at her with a great smile and say, good. Didn't matter what you said. He said good. you see it? How you doing? Oh, good. So, very good. So he'd go back and forth to every room finally, and he'd do the same thing. And somebody had labeled me somehow deficient, but he could remember the names of everybody in the hospital, right? After reading it once, right? So he'd go and he'd introduce himself, and then he would say, tell me your name again, I guess. Sarah. And he'd come back, and he'd say, hi, Sarah. How you doing? And I get this from the head nurse. When he comes around and says that the second time, Sarah has a problem. And her problem is, how does she answer? Because she's clear, he's going to say good. And so Sarah says, feeling better, Eddie. And Eddie says, oh, good. The head nurse, when we did the evaluation, said we have 72 doctors and 1 healer in this hospital. And she wasn't kidding.
72 doctors.
Because he turned people to his smiling view of the world. Just by the way people responded. Now, he would sometimes goof up in delivering the mail, and he would deliver the elephant mail to the box desk. Probably do it 2-3 times a week. But the woman at the box desk would call the woman at the elephant desk. They just get up and meet each other, swap the mail, that kind of thing. So when we were doing this evaluation, we talked to Lopez, and we said, how's it gone with it? This is after 2 years. And he says, well, I'm up here on the 8th floor, and he's on the first 7 floors. So I don't know. He says, the 2 things I know is, he says, we have a half day. We have 17 departments here in the hospital, and we have a half day each year in our management system to promote interdepartmental communication. And he says, single-handedly, Eddie has created more interdepartmental communication than all our meetings ever did. And I said, well, how does he do that? And he says, he constantly misdelivers the mail. And he's serious about it. His father told him it was a joke. He said, first year he was here, I came to my annual meeting about how we ought to get together. They all know each other. What happened? So he says that's one of the things he did. He said the other thing is that I noticed is, he says about 5% of our employees are absent every day. And he said, Eddie is occasionally absent. He says, if Eddie is absent, I get 4 or 5 calls from people in the hospital, some patients from some departmental secretary saying, what's wrong with that? And he said, now, I have 60 people who are out today, and nobody calls me ever about them. And any day that Eddie's out, I get 4, 5, 6 calls. So at least from up here, it looks to me like there's one person people really care about in this hospital, and it's Eddie. So you see his gift, and how happy it makes him. So can I see the next one? This is a woman named Mary, and Mary thought that she was too fat, and she's fairly heavy, and she wanted to do something about that. So they found that there is an association for weight reduction in the neighborhood called TOPS, Tape Off Pound Sensible. It's not a commercial program. It's like a self-help group. So Show me the next one. Oh, show me the next one after this one. Yeah, there. So this is the tops group, right? And do you think it'd be better if we had, no, you need the lights, right? Yeah. Can you see it at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's Mary, close up, and then the other women. But when she came, there were 4 of them, and they had all the official titles. There was a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, right? So when she came, they felt she should have a title. So she is the special assistant to the president, who is the gray-haired woman. And they have become very, very close friends. And when Mary saw this picture, she said, she laughed. She said, "Look, we're all smiling." She says, "Going to Igler's." Now, Igler's is the ice cream store across the street. And apparently, after the meeting, they all go over to the ice cream store. They take it after the meeting. So I think she may be a little more honest than the other 4 would have been about that. But she has entered a world of women that she has never known in a lifetime of being put together with people who have labels. The same way. And they open things for her. Another thing is that she's a very religious person, and she talked a lot about Jesus. And so they found another association in the neighborhood, which is a prayer group, Bible reading prayer group, who have every Wednesday dinner with each other. So they introduced her to the group, and she joined. Can you go back? And so this is the prayer group. Mary's here in the red in the front. And the couple who sort of lead it are there in the back, and they have become very close friends of hers as well. And she stays fairly frequently with them. And then, show me, yeah. Then, this is nothing. So, when these 5 women started doing this, right, they asked, what should we do? And the organizer said, do what you always do, just take the person with you. Right? How would you learn about the community? Well, go with somebody in the community and around the community. So that's how a lot of people became that in that way. And so one of the places that one of the members of the task force with Mary would go to her beauty parlor. This is a largely Puerto Rican beauty parlor. And Mary met the owner. His name's Beatrice. There you can see her with the hairdryer. And she and Mary became very sick. Mary didn't have a job there. She hangs there. She says that women tell truth in the beauty parlor. And she loves to hear it because she doesn't know what everyday life's like. So she hears what women talk about, right? She's entering a new world. She loves to hear that. And they have become very tight. And so Beatrice got married, and she had a baby, and she needed a godmother when their baby needed to be baptized. So next picture. So here we are on baptismal day with Mary, Beatrice, her baby, and her husband. So she became a godmother. That's the second story. Third story is about this man. This man's name is Ricardo. And Ricardo is a person who mostly stands up most of the day, and he doesn't talk hardly at all. When he talks, he doesn't use words that people seem to understand. He's a silent person. And so when they met him, he was at home with his mother. And they had a hard time trying to figure out what's his gift. But one day, when one of the women were there, a police car went by with a siren on and a blue light turning around, and he rushed out into the street, out of the porch, and waved his hands and cheered. Really excited by the police, happy and shouting things, the words of a kind. And so they said, well, maybe he likes the police. So 2 of them went with him down to the police station, the Logan Square police station, about a mean place you never want to be, right? And since it's a Puerto Rican neighborhood, the captain is named Tim O'Brien. So these 2 Puerto Rican women are with Ricardo, proposing that he be in the police station because he loves the police, and he's standing there just bright and happy in front of the police officer. And O'Brien says to them, I couldn't do anything like that. They'd never accept that down headquarters. I couldn't do that. And the one woman told us, she said, I said to him, Commander, my brother is so-and-so, and he works in this station. So I know about the police. I come from a police family. And I'm on the Logan Square Neighborhood Association board, and I know this neighborhood. And we're 60,000 people, and we hate you, police. You abuse us, you call us names, you misuse us. We really dislike you, police. Which I think O'Brien knew. She says, there are 59,999 people in Logan Square who hate your guts. And standing in front of you is the one who likes police. And you say he can't beat you. And she said, that turned her. She said, will you be with him every moment? That's all it happened, right? So they began to just be around the place with Ricardo, and they couldn't see. It was his home. He was his perfect guy. To this day, nobody knows why. He doesn't use words we would understand. And so after a couple days, he began to connect with, can I sit next to this man? This is Joe Dragone, who is the sergeant who is the head of the vice detectives in Logan Square. And for some reason, Ricardo realizes, and he told us, this is not a good picture. He says, because usually it's reversed. He says, most of the time I'm sitting down, he's standing behind me. Right? And so we said to him, well, what does he do here? And this is an interesting question. And he looked at us as though we were nuts. Right? And he said, he doesn't do anything. He's my guardian angel. He says there are 5,000 police, and I'm only one with the guardian angel. And he didn't smile when he said it. I see the next one. So, at the end of a year, O'Brien says to us, he's done, I can tell you 2 things about him. He says, if he ever gets out of here, he's lost. Right? We think, so I don't know what Ricardo thinks he's lost, but we think he's lost. And he says, so he got out one day. And let me tell you, Mr. McKnight, what I did. This is with great pride, this whole Irish cup. I called a Plan 5, and I hadn't called a Plan 5 since the Second World War. I didn't know what Plan 5 was. Right? So I asked him, and they have Plan 1, Plan 2, Plan 3, Plan 4, Plan 5. Plan 1 being 10 police officers go to this situation. Right? We need a lot of officers there. Plan 2 is 20 of you go. But Plan 5 is all of you go, right? We're going to stop everything else. But he called Plan 5 and said, find Ricardo. And he said, we found him in 7.5 minutes. With great pride. He's one of us. If you had walked into his home and seen him standing in the corner of the living room with an occasional words you couldn't understand, would you believe that the meanest place in Logan Square would stop everything it did to find this man? The other thing he said about him, he said, you know, We have generally been picking up people on vagrancy charges or disorderly charges, people who didn't have full debt. And we bring them in, put them in the tank overnight, that kind of thing. He says, that probably accounted for 5 to 10% of our arrests in the day. He says, but if you look now, we don't have any of those arrests. And he says it's because of the guard. Because everybody here knows him and understands who he is as a person. And now they can understand that there are other people like him that have been arrested. And he says, so they stop. Experience is better than teaching. It's the best teaching. Because they're always trying to get these cops to be humane. But who got them humane was him. Sometimes there are people in service systems who say the reason these people are with us is because the community doesn't want them. So engrave this picture in your mind. And you can say to anybody who says that, that's nonsense. I know a rough, tough neighborhood where a bunch of pretty rough policemen have taken unto themselves a man who doesn't talk and just stands and made them his own. Who would know that the Logan Square police station was waiting for this man? How did he get there? Through connection. This is the kind of story you see over and over. Let me then show the last one. This is Anne. And Anne's parents, when she was 6 weeks, on the advice of doctors, gave her to the Illinois Home for the Feeble-Minded in the country outside of Dixon, Illinois. And she lived there for 60 years. And they closed the place down. And then in their wisdom, they took this girl and raised an institution in the country and put her in a group home in a Puerto Rican neighborhood in Chicago. Now, there's a match. And it was the most wonderful thing that they had ever done in their certificate. Because when the connectors met her, they said she was the person we really saw we needed her, because she's the grandmother that everybody would love to have. And so she said we almost fought over who we were going to connect, because there are a lot of families here that don't have any grandparents here. And so we connected her to her family. Can you show the next one? With a little girl. Can you show the next one? There. And there she has been the grandmother. She became a grandmother at 60, and she died at 63. And the family said she was served for 60 years and lived for 3. What is it? How much was spent on her not living for 60 years? How little was spent to connect her with the Lord? One woman goes by. So now what have you seen? The reason I wanted to share these with you is because it helps us broaden our understanding of what is a gift. We have seen a community that got the gift of a great healer. The gift of a godmother. The gift of a guardian angel and the gift of a grandmother. Hidden hope. Brought hope. This is what needs to happen in Tucson and every other city that I know. Now, we have a website. There's a description of all this in a very nice story. Our website is abcdinstitute.org. In fact, I think the last, I'll just say it. And then you click on publications, and you'll see one of the possibilities is downloadable publications. And the last, or next to last of those publications is Community Building in Logan Square. And it's an example for any of you in any neighborhood. It has cost the amazing amount of $30,000 a year. Those 5 people, the connectors, connected in 2 years, people to all these families and residents in the neighborhood. Can we see the next one? To these associations. See the map? Next one, to these business institutions. Next one, to these not-for-profit institutions. Not jobs, relationships, gifting, not against jobs. So, the motto of this neighborhood is, we need you. Every last one. And so that's what we know finally. That's what the strongest neighborhood could be, is one where every last one is. But it never happens without an invitation. Actually, the greatest role for community building is exemplified in a hostess or a host. A person who invites people in and then connects them with others. So you could call this hostessy. So it's a way for a future. It's hopeful, it's positive, it's gifted, it's community program. It's win-win all the way. So I have kept you 3 minutes after the time when you should have left. And I appreciate your ability this evening. You could have been enriched by watching television. I'm sorry I've wasted this much of your time. Please get home. And we'll see you again sometime.
Take a quick minute to thank Dr. McKnight for enlightening us this evening with this wonderful presentation. The information that you shared with us is just so important, and it's something that we all need to take back with us and consider and start implementing in our own lives. And on behalf of the Aurora Foundation, we want to present you with this award. It's for our 2nd annual Ideas Making a Difference Thought Leaders Speaker Series, provoking unique perspectives, tapping imaginations, exciting the thinking of others, with gratitude to you.
Well, thank you.